Good morning, Tomorrow News. We're at a very critical point of some of these developing stories we've been watching this week, maybe even more so today than even the last several days. And I'll explain why. It's been a little bit of a crazy night, as my hair can suggest for you. But you know what happens when my kids are up most nights? Is that I end up doing more reading for Smarter News. And so what I figured out last night is I thought, let me pick three numbers of some of our top stories this week, three numbers that we can easily remember that give us some context for the stories that we're watching. So we're going to start off in Cuba. Before I get to Cuba, I want to just go back again and remind us about what's been happening this week in Cuba. We've seen people come to the streets for the first time in several decades. For some context, there were protests back in the 1990s, but we really haven't seen something like this in decades. So this is why it's significant. We know that people are up against the communist regime that uses violence to put down these protests and also to keep the public more or less in line. The Economist had a really interesting sort of analysis of Cuba, and this underscores a little bit of what I'm talking about. Let me see if I can, well, you're not going to be able to see some of it. So let me go ahead and pull that off, but I'll put that article in our website so you can see it. Basically, what The Economist was saying is that we're at a point in this story where what happens in the next several days will tell us how significant the last several days have been. Who will come to the aid of the Cuban people? And will these protests be for naught? Will they suddenly sort of fade away? Or will they actually lead to change? The Cuban government doesn't have the ability to buy its people back. It doesn't have that sort of economic leverage. So however they win the people back, it's either going to be through force or they have to have some sort of convincing narrative. And that's why this story can go a lot of different directions, because what will that narrative be, and how active will the United States be, for example, in trying to help the Cuban people in one way or the other. What I want to show you here is the statistic that really struck me last night. The literacy rate in Cuba, because you think of a community that is stricken by poverty, but the literacy rate is 99.8%. So you're talking about an almost complete literate public, very, very high literacy rates. And this shows something about communism. Education is mandatory, it's free. So people learn to read, but as they become adults, they have no access to the internet necessarily, or the internet is censored, so they're not able to read the things that they want to. And here we see the two sides, right? The sides of communism that you're seeing, well, hey, we can talk about an education system where people are literate, but then they have no control over their own destiny. They're not able to read the things that they want to read. They're not able to watch the things that they want to watch. They're not able to do that. So imagine what that's like. So that's a statistic I think is worth your time. 99.8%, almost a complete literate society there. Let me go ahead and stop sharing this for a second. I want to move on to South Africa, because we've been watching what's going on in South Africa, one of the most developed nations in the continent of Africa. We've seen mass looting, all of this related to a political story, but now the chaos has bred more chaos. And what we're seeing now in this story is really individuals stand up to try to defend their particular, what would be called their townships, for example. We have a man here, I saw this video, thank you to my friends in South Africa that continue to share some of the more popular viral videos. This man is talking about how he's going to defend the commerce area in his township and that he's going to help law enforcement do so. But this is the situation in South Africa where you have your average people standing up to try to protect the parts of their economy that have been able to be producing, and in a time when unemployment is at 32%. That's the number I want you to remember. Over 30% unemployment in South Africa. This is why you're hearing, well, this looting is happening because people are unemployed. Well, people are unemployed in South Africa. That's absolutely true. But again, the looting and the rioting has sort of taken on almost a life of its own. We know what that's like, right? When chaos breeds more chaos. And so that's the situation in South Africa today. So something to keep an eye on. Just for context, the unemployment rate in America is just under 6%. So we're talking about more than 30% in South Africa. Final thing I want to show you, this is not necessarily a statistic, but it has to do with one of the top stories really all around the world, continues to be the pandemic. And I want to show you this graph because this is something that you might hear a lot about. Not necessarily one number statistic, but something just to keep in mind. So you may hear that the number of COVID cases in America have doubled over the last several weeks. That is true. Back in June, we were at about 11,000 cases a day nationwide. Now we're around 24,000. So we've doubled in the last several weeks. There are those that are suggesting this is due to variants, due to July 4th gatherings. But take a look at that graph right there. This is the context that we need if we hear that cases are doubling. We want to pay attention to that. But we also want to remember that at the height of the pandemic, we were seeing more than 250,000 cases a day. So we're not there yet. We don't want to get back there. But just the context that we need for some of these statistics that are coming at you, I just want you to be aware of when we talk about that. Something else I want you to watch how people are using their language, health officials. Former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb, I hear some screaming, I'm going to have to go. Former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb, now when he's talking about immunity in America, is talking about people that had previous infections and those that had a vaccine. When you hear other health officials, when they're talking about immunity in America, they're only talking about people that have gotten the vaccine. But we know immunity is complicated. So I've noticed that change for some that are speaking about the COVID-19 pandemic, but not all. And so watch when people are talking about it to you, how they're explaining, what does community immunity look like? Is it just a focus on vaccines? Is it also a focus on previous infections? How do we weigh both and bring in a complete picture? So those are a couple things for you guys to know today. Okay, screaming stop just for a second. I'm just going to take a sip. Well, I can't. They're fine. They're fine, I promise. I do have something fun for you. We just saw the world record for the largest sandcastle ever built happen over the last several weeks. I reached out to the designer. He shared a personal video with me, and I'm going to cut that for you today because I feel like we kind of need a sandcastle. He also shared some tips about how to build your own sandcastle. Maybe not as big as his, but useful information. We're giving you a little bit of everything here on Smarter News. All right, guys, have a great day. Putting all of this plus more on smarternews.com with links to what I showed you here so you can easily access it and review it if you'd like to see more. Have a great day. Gotta go. Bye, guys.